The glass tower of Halcyon Tech shimmered in the midday sun, its reflective panes catching the light like a diamond in the downtown skyline. Inside, however, chaos reigned. Servers blinked red, phones rang off the hook, and a thick fog of panic settled over the open concept floor of the 23rd story. In the center of it all stood CEO Preston Maddox, a man known for being unshakable, until that moment. Sweat dampened the collar of his pristine white shirt as he stared at the monitor, flashing a single damning word: failure. The entire system had crashed, wiping out live financial trades, client access portals, and months of data retrieval protocols in less than 5 minutes. The IT department huddled in a corner, frantic fingers typing away, eyes bloodshot and brows furrowed. No one could figure out what happened or how to fix it. Preston's executive assistant whispered nervously into his Bluetooth earpiece, fielding panicked calls from investors whose 7-figure portfolios were now inaccessible. "This is bad," Preston muttered, almost to himself. The company had survived lawsuits, stock dips, and boardroom betrayals, but a full system blackout on the day of quarterly audits was a different beast. The servers were supposed to be bulletproof. He turned to Devin, the lead software engineer. "How long until we're back up?" Devin shook his head. "Could be hours, maybe longer." Halcyon Tech wasn't just any tech firm. It managed security infrastructure for hundreds of companies across the US, including government subcontractors. Every minute offline risked exposure, breach, and permanent loss of trust. The CEO's carefully curated empire teetered on the edge of collapse. Investors were already threatening lawsuits, and their federal compliance officer had requested a full report within the hour. Preston gritted his teeth. "I want every backup spun up. Now." Devin looked like he might cry. "Sir, the backups are corrupt. All of them." A stunned silence followed, interrupted only by the soft hum of a broken server cooling fan. Somewhere in the distance, someone dropped a mug. It shattered like the illusion of control Preston had held all morning. On the other end of the building, in a dimly lit hallway beneath the executive floors, a soft hum of a different sort echoed off tile floors. Maria Hernandez, the night shift cleaner, had been called in early to deal with the unexpected chaos. She moved quietly, avoiding the stampeding suits, head down and cart gliding. No one noticed her. They never did. She had worked in that building for 11 years, scrubbing glass and polishing marble, learning every crevice of the corporate machine without ever being seen as part of it. But that day she wasn't alone. Her 17-year-old son Luis stood beside her, hands in his hoodie pockets, eyes darting around the room. Luis wasn't supposed to be there. His school had canceled classes due to a power outage, and his mom, unable to leave him home alone that day, brought him along on the promise that he stay quiet and out of the way. He had agreed reluctantly. Luis was lanky, soft-spoken, and painfully aware of how people looked at him. A kid from Southside with no father and a mom who cleaned floors. He walked with a slouch, more from shame than anything else. But what no one knew, not his mom, not even himself fully, was that inside his head lived a mind like lightning. Fast, observant, endlessly curious. And that morning, as he wandered past the server room with a blinking red light, curiosity took over. Luis paused at the threshold of the open server room door, drawn by the red strobe of the failing systems. The room was empty, abandoned in the scramble upstairs. He stepped inside slowly, scanning the walls of racks, humming with mechanical stress and blinking wildly in unsynchronized panic. The monitor displayed lines of error code, some of which Luis recognized from YouTube tutorials he'd binged late into the night, headphones on while his mom cleaned in the next room. He didn't fully understand the systems, but the architecture, the logic of it, made sense in a way school never had. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small USB drive he carried like a totem, a piece of code he'd written himself that simulated recovery paths on a sandbox network he'd built at the local rec center's donated computers. Back upstairs, Preston was barking orders into his phone, pacing like a cornered animal. "No, I can't give you a timeline, Michael. If I had one, we wouldn't be having this conversation, would we?" he snapped, slamming the phone down on his desk. Devin and his engineers were no closer to a solution. Several had begun arguing, while others stared blankly at their screens. Panic was turning into paralysis. Preston looked around the room. This was supposed to be a fortress of innovation, yet it felt like a sinking ship. "Somebody needs to do something," he yelled, but no one answered. Not until the elevator chimed softly in the corner, and out stepped Maria, her uniform wrinkled, her eyes darting nervously, with Luis trailing behind her. "Mr. Maddox," Maria began, her voice barely above a whisper. I think my son may have found something." "In the server room." Preston blinked. Your son? He repeated, incredulous. Eyes turned. Conversation stopped. He shouldn't even be here, Devin interjected, his voice sharp. These systems are classified. It's against protocol. Protocol's not helping us right now, Preston snapped. He looked at Luis, who shrunk slightly under the weight of so many gazes. Well, you said you found something? Luis hesitated, then nodded. I think I might know how to reverse the failure loop. I've seen this kind of attack in simulations, only they're masking the entry point through recursive backups. It's why your failsafes are failing. Dead silence fell across the room. Devin stepped forward, voice heavy with skepticism. Kid, do you even know what recursive corruption means? Luis's jaw clenched slightly. It means your backups are being infected during the restoration process because you're restoring from snapshots that were already compromised. You're chasing a clean state that doesn't exist anymore. But if you mirror a runtime memory dump before the chain reacts, you can isolate the original logic fork. Preston stared. Devin turned red. That's not... Wait, how would you? I wrote a simulator, Luis said, voice gaining confidence. It models isolated environments using borrowed kernel code. I can show you. Just let me try. He held up the USB like a sword drawn in defiance. For several agonizing seconds, no one moved. Then Preston nodded slowly. Give him access. Read-only permissions. Run it in a quarantine container. Devin sputtered a protest, but Preston cut him off with a glare. We're drowning. If he's wrong, we're no worse off than we are now. Luis walked calmly to the terminal, sliding the USB into the port. As the emulator booted, his hands moved with speed and certainty, typing in lines of code that seemed foreign to most in the room. One by one, the red lights in the server room blinked yellow, then green. On the main monitor, a graph charted upward, showing progressive recovery. Preston's mouth opened slightly. For the first time in an hour, hope crept into the room. As the room watched in stunned silence, Luis navigated the command line like a concert pianist moving through a familiar symphony. He isolated the root injection point and rewrote the pathway for data retrieval in real time. Devin stood behind him, speechless, as Luis patched a vulnerability the IT team had missed for years. Where did you learn this? Someone asked quietly. Luis didn't look up. Online mostly. And I test stuff at the rec center when the internet works. Preston exchanged glances with his CFO. There was no formal training here, just raw talent wrapped in a hoodie and street smarts. Luis wasn't supposed to be part of this world, but he had just become its center. Minutes ticked by and one by one subsystems flickered back to life. Halcyon Tech's client dashboard reconnected. Firewalls realigned. Account access was restored. The monitor pinged a bright green. System status, stabilized. A cheer broke out among the engineers, an almost delirious wave of disbelief and relief. Preston let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Luis sat back in the chair, hands in his lap, not smiling but breathing heavily, the weight of what he'd just done slowly catching up to him. Maria, still standing quietly near the door, wiped at her eyes. You did good, Mijo, she whispered. Her voice trembled with pride. Preston stepped forward and extended his hand. Luis, I don't even know what to say. You just saved this company. Luis looked at the outstretched hand, then slowly shook it. I just saw a hole, he said. I filled it. Devin coughed awkwardly, clearly trying to recover some authority. We'll need to validate everything. Make sure there's no recontamination, but, yeah, that was legit. Preston turned to the room. Someone get me legal. I want to talk about bringing him on, maybe an apprenticeship, something. We can't let this talent walk out of here. Maria's eyes widened. Apprenticeship, she asked. Luis said nothing, but his mouth twitched into the beginnings of a smile. By that afternoon, Luis was sitting in a conference room flanked by Preston, Devin, and 2 board members. They handed him a non-disclosure agreement and explained in slow, lawyerly detail what the apprenticeship would entail. A fast-tracked path into their cybersecurity program, full mentorship, and eventually a paid internship. Luis's head swam. He had never sat in a leather chair that soft or drunk water from a bottle that cost more than lunch. They spoke to him like he mattered, like he wasn't just the janitor's kid but someone worth investing in. He didn't know what to say. Then Maria walked in with a tray of fresh coffee and caught sight of him. Their eyes met. In that instant, it became real. Later that night, Luis sat on their worn-out couch at home, laptop open, replaying the day's events in his mind. His mom sat beside him, scrolling her phone. You really fixed their whole system? She asked for the 5th time. He nodded. I guess I did. Maria looked at him for a long time, her face full of things she didn't say. "I always knew you were smart," she said finally. "But today you made them see it too." Luis closed his laptop and leaned back, overwhelmed but proud. He wasn't rich. He didn't have degrees. But for once, someone had seen him for who he truly was. And that changed everything. The next morning, Halcyon Tech's lobby was packed, not with employees but with reporters, cameras, and curious onlookers. Word of the miraculous system recovery had spread like wildfire after someone on the IT team leaked a snapshot of the green screen recovery terminal, with Luis's name in the task log. The headline on Tech Insider read, "Teenage janitor's son rescues multimillion-dollar tech firm from collapse." By noon, the story had hit national outlets. Journalists weren't just interested in the crash, they were captivated by the who. A 17-year-old Ladings kid from the South Side, with no formal training, fixing a crisis that seasoned engineers couldn't touch? It was the perfect storm of underdog brilliance. Luis didn't know how to handle the attention. He'd been invisible for most of his life, at school, in public, even at his mom's job. Suddenly, strangers were calling him a genius. TV trucks camped outside their apartment. Classmates he hadn't spoken to in years flooded his inbox with friend requests. "This is insane," he whispered, clutching his phone. Maria agreed. "They see you now, Mijo. But stay grounded. Don't let them change you." Halcyon Tech's PR team scrambled to shape the narrative, inviting Luis and Maria back to the office to do a formal press conference. Preston stood behind him proudly, a hand on his shoulder, introducing him as the mind who saved Halcyon. At the press conference, the media fired off questions in rapid succession. "How did you know what to do? Are you enrolled in a computer science program? What's your next step?" Luis tried to answer as best he could, his voice quiet but steady. "I just taught myself. It started as a hobby. I didn't expect it to ever mean anything." That humility struck a chord with people. He wasn't arrogant. He didn't act like a prodigy. He was just a kid who had a gift and the courage to use it when it mattered. The story began trending on social media under hashtags like #JanitorsSonGenius and #FromTheHallways to the Servers. Within days, scholarship offers poured in. MIT, Stanford, and Georgia Tech reached out through formal letters and alumni contacts. A local nonprofit launched a GoFundMe for Luis's education, raising over $100,000 in less than 48 hours. People shared their own stories of overlooked talent, of being underestimated, of growing up in neighborhoods where expectations were low and opportunity was scarce. Luis's story was more than just tech heroism. It became a symbol of what happens when potential meets possibility. He and Maria were invited to appear on a morning news show, where the host tearfully declared, "You represent every mother who believes in her child, even when the world doesn't." Despite the noise, Luis kept his routine simple. He still walked to the rec center some afternoons. He still helped his mom with groceries. But now he walked with his head a little higher. He wore his hoodie not as a shield but as a statement. People looked at him differently, not with pity or avoidance but with admiration. And through it all he kept coding. At night, in silence, he refined the system that had saved Halcyon, quietly building an open-source model to help small organizations prevent the same kind of attack. "Knowledge should be free," he wrote in the repository description. It wasn't just about the one company he saved, it was about who he'd become in the process. 2 months later, the energy at Halcyon Tech had shifted. The once chaotic hallways were now humming with pride and productivity. Preston had quietly overhauled the internal mentorship structure, inspired by one teenager who rewrote the definition of capability. On a bright Monday morning, the elevators chimed and employees turned as Luis stepped out, not in sneakers and a hoodie this time, but in fitted slacks and a button-down shirt, laptop bag slung over his shoulder. "Is that?" one junior engineer whispered. Devin appeared around the corner, blinking. "Luis." Luis smiled, held up a badge and tapped it against the secure entry. It read, "Luis Hernandez, Junior Cybersecurity Architect." The room burst into applause. No one had expected him back so soon, let alone in an official capacity. Luis walked over to the same terminal where he had made history and logged in like he belonged. Because now he did. Devin approached him, this time with none of the skepticism he'd shown before. "Hey," he said quietly, "I reviewed your code last week. It's elegant. I don't know how else to say it." Luis gave a small nod. "Thanks. It's cleaner now. I added some self-healing logic." Devin blinked. "You what?" Luis pulled up the new module. Devin stared. "This is beyond what we're doing. You should be leading this team." Luis shrugged. I'm here to learn. For now. Maria, of course, had cried when he showed her the badge. I used to wipe down those desks, she whispered. Now you sit at one. Luis hugged her tight. I wouldn't be here without you. Halcyon Tech made a public announcement about his new position, pairing it with a community outreach initiative named in his honor. Project Luis, an internship and mentorship pipeline for underrepresented youth interested in tech. Schools from around the city signed up. Preston gave Luis full control of its development, and it became his new obsession. This isn't just my story, he told the board. It's the start of something bigger. Despite his new title, Luis never stopped being the kid who fixed things. He visited high schools, spoke on panels, and mentored other teens at the rec center who reminded him of himself. Awkward, bright, uncertain. You don't need permission to be smart, he told them. Just a place to use it. Halcyon Tech noticed a surge in applications from students who had never considered tech before. Young people of color, kids from lower-income families, some with parents who cleaned floors like Maria had. The company, once seen as another faceless tech giant, now wore its humility proudly. And Luis was the beating heart of that change. The transformation wasn't just corporate. It was personal. Preston, once aloof and unreachable, now held open office hours once a week. He even took Maria to lunch, something no CEO had ever done with a cleaner. You raised a hell of a man, he told her over empanadas. She smiled quietly. I just gave him the space to grow. The rest he figured out himself. Across the table, Preston looked out at the skyline and nodded. Well, he saved my company. And maybe a piece of my soul. Neither of them said anything after that. They didn't need to. The silence was filled with mutual respect, and the unspoken knowledge that something rare had happened here. Something real. 3 months into his new role, Luis was called into an executive meeting unlike any he'd attended before. The room was dim, the atmosphere tense. Preston sat at the head of the table, flanked by a man in a navy suit with an unsettling smile. Victor Langston, a venture capitalist representing a powerful firm interested in acquiring Halcyon Tech's new self-healing cybersecurity module. It's revolutionary, Langston said, nodding toward Luis. And we'd like to license it exclusively for our defense clients. The initial offer is $7 million. The air thickened. Luis sat stunned. He hadn't built it to be sold off to shadowy contractors. He built it to protect people, all people. Preston leaned back in his chair, watching Luis carefully. It's your design, he said slowly. Which means it's your call. Langston chuckled. Son, you could change your life with this deal. Buy your mother a house. Go to any school in the country. The doors this opens, you'd be a fool not to. Luis looked at the contract folder being slid toward him. He didn't touch it. He stared at the words on the front. Exclusive rights agreement. It felt like selling a part of himself. He remembered the kids at the rec center, the cracked screens, the borrowed books, the ones no one ever looked twice at. Was he supposed to turn his back on them for a check? That night, Luis sat on the rooftop of their apartment building, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. Maria climbed up with a blanket and a thermos of cinnamon tea. She sat beside him and didn't say a word. After a while, Luis spoke. They want to buy my code. All of it. Lock it up and use it for... I don't even know what. Maria sipped her tea. You already know the answer. He nodded slowly. I just needed to hear someone say I'm not crazy for turning down money like that. Maria placed a hand on his shoulder. You were never crazy. You're just not for sale. The next day, Luis returned to the boardroom. Langston smiled confidently, assuming the deal was done. But Luis remained standing. I won't sell it, he said clearly. I wrote it for everyone. If you want access, it'll stay open source. No exclusive rights. No restrictions. Langston's smile faded. You're throwing away millions. Preston folded his arms, a faint smirk on his lips. No, Luis replied. I'm building something bigger than money. And with that, he turned and walked out, leaving the room stunned. Some called him foolish. Others called him noble. But Luis didn't care. He had made his choice. And that made all the difference. In the weeks that followed, Luis's open-source model gained global traction. Universities adopted it. Nonprofits used it to protect vulnerable data. A team in Ghana emailed to say his code had stopped a cyber attack on a hospital's power grid. Luis read the message 3 times, stunned. That was the proof he needed. This was why he couldn't sell out. One afternoon, while finishing a rewrite for a school in Brazil, he got a video message from a group of kids at the rec center. They were grinning, holding up signs that read, "Thank you, Luis," and "We can code too." He wiped his eyes and smiled. He wasn't just making systems stronger, he was making people believe in themselves. 6 months after he stabilized Halcyon Tech and rejected the exclusive deal, Luis received a letter he never expected, a formal invitation from the White House. He had been selected as one of the recipients of the National Medal of Civic Innovation, awarded to individuals who use technology to serve the public good. Maria held the envelope with trembling fingers, reading the words out loud again and again. "You're going to Washington, Mijo?" she said in disbelief. Luis laughed, half in shock, half in awe. He had never flown on a plane, never left the state. And now he was about to stand in front of the nation's most powerful people, not as a janitor's kid but as a visionary. The award ceremony was a spectacle of lights, suits, and media frenzy. Maria wore a sky-blue dress she'd borrowed from a neighbor. Luis stood tall in a fitted black suit gifted by the Halcyon board, the same USB key that started it all tucked in his pocket like a lucky charm. When the announcer called his name, the applause thundered. Luis stepped up to the podium, facing rows of dignitaries, tech leaders, educators, and teens watching from schools across the country. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned in. But Luis ignored the noise. He focused on a single row in the front, where Maria sat, hands clasped tight, eyes brimming with pride. He cleared his throat and began. 6 months ago, I was just the kid sitting in the hallway while my mom cleaned the floors. I didn't have a title or a future anyone could see. But I had curiosity. I had a laptop. And I had a mom who never let me feel like I was small, even when the world tried to make me invisible. The room fell into reverent silence. What I did that day wasn't magic. It was preparation meeting opportunity. And it shouldn't be rare, it should be possible for every kid in every zip code. Cameras clicked, but Luis's voice remained steady. I didn't build my code to sell it. I built it to share it. Because when knowledge is locked away, it serves no one. He looked down for a second, collecting himself. Then he continued. We talk about the digital divide like it's a technology problem. It's not. It's a belief problem. Too many kids think they don't belong in these rooms. Too many adults don't look for talent unless it comes with a business card. But brilliance doesn't care about your background. It just needs a chance. The audience was silent, hanging on every word. Luis finished with one final thought. My mother once said, Mijo, you don't have to be seen to be real. But once they do see you, make it count. So I'm here. And I'm going to make it count. For every kid still waiting in the hallway. The crowd rose to their feet before he even stepped away from the mic. A standing ovation rolled through the auditorium like thunder. Maria wept openly, clapping with her whole heart. Luis stood still for a moment, soaking in the moment. He didn't smile for the cameras. He smiled for his younger self, for every overlooked genius, for every mother who never stopped believing. That night, news anchors across the country played the speech in full. Social media exploded with clips and quotes. But the story had stopped being just about a crash or a code. It had become something deeper. Luis had become something bigger. When Luis returned home, the South Side didn't look the same. It wasn't that the buildings had changed, they were still worn, the sidewalks cracked, the murals fading, but there was a new energy in the air. Kids he didn't recognize were skateboarding with laptops in their backpacks. The local library had a new computer lab, donated in his name. Even the rec center had rebranded their tech room, the Luis Hernandez Learning Hub. He stood in the doorway, stunned, as kids clustered around computers running simulations and basic coding challenges. A 12-year-old girl turned to him with wide eyes. Are you the Luis? He laughed. I guess I am. It wasn't fame that had shifted the atmosphere. It was possibility. For the first time, kids in the neighborhood had someone who looked like them doing something extraordinary, and doing it without leaving his roots behind. Luis visited the local high school and found his old math teacher waiting with a bear hug and a proud tear. They talk about you every day, she said. We've got freshmen asking to join robotics just because of your story. Luis walked into a classroom of students who looked at him like he was a celebrity, but he sat down among them and said, Nah, I'm just a nerd from around the way. Let's build something together. Maria, meanwhile, had become a local legend. The grocery store clerks gave her free roses. Neighbors dropped off homemade tamales. She was known simply as Luis's mom, and she wore the title like royalty. I didn't do anything special, she'd say with a modest shrug. But everyone knew the truth. Without her love, her long hours, her whispered encouragements in the middle of dark days, there would have been no system fix, no speech, no project. She wasn't just part of the story. She was the root. And now, everyone saw her strength for what it truly was, foundational. Despite his rising status, Luis never distanced himself from where he came from. When Halcyon Tech offered to move him closer to the office in a sleek downtown condo, he declined. "I've got everything I need here," he told Preston. "Besides, I like the noise." He still helped his mom clean on weekends, though now it was their own apartment, purchased with a grant from a nonprofit inspired by his journey. The furniture was new, but the warmth was the same. At night, they'd sit on the same couch, eat rice and beans, and talk about everything from cloud storage to soccer scores. One evening, Luis hosted a small coding workshop in the rec center. A group of kids gathered around as he taught them how to build their first firewall protocol. A boy with curly hair and oversized glasses raised his hand and asked, "Do you think I can do what you did?" Luis paused, knelt down, and looked him in the eyes. "I know you can. Just remember, being invisible doesn't mean you're not powerful. You're a storm waiting to happen. So stay curious, stay stubborn, and when your moment comes, take it." The boy grinned. And in that moment, Luis saw it again, that spark. The kind of spark that could change the world. One rainy afternoon, as Luis was fine-tuning a community firewall project, an encrypted email popped into his inbox. No subject, no sender. Curious, he clicked it. The message contained a short paragraph and a linked file. It read, "We've been watching your work. What you've done with open-source security is unprecedented. We need minds like yours. Confidential proposal attached. Please review." The attachment opened into a confidential briefing document from a global humanitarian tech organization called SentinelOne, known for deploying cyber solutions in war zones and protecting activists under digital threat. They wanted Luis to lead a new division, travel the world, build defensive systems, train people under siege. It was everything he cared about. But it would mean leaving home. Luis stared at the screen for a long time. It was the kind of opportunity people dreamed of: global impact, high-level collaboration, life-changing pay. But his community was finally blooming. Project Luis had become a full-fledged mentorship program. Kids were depending on him not just as a symbol but as a guide. Could he walk away from that? He printed out the offer and showed it to Maria. She read it quietly, her face unreadable. When she finished, she folded the paper neatly and handed it back. "The world needs you," she said. "But don't forget, we do too. Just make sure you're moving towards something, not running away from what matters." Luis couldn't sleep that night. He paced the living room, the rain tapping at the window like the tick of an invisible clock. He thought of the hallway outside the server room. The blinking red lights. The stunned silence of executives. The feeling of control and chaos. He thought of the rec center kids, their eyes wide with wonder. He thought of his mother, her back bent over mops, her strength more solid than concrete. And he realized something. Maybe his choice wasn't binary. Maybe this was his next problem to solve. Could he go global without abandoning local? Could he scale purpose without sacrificing presence? The next morning, Luis emailed SentinelOne. He thanked them for the offer, asked for a meeting, and laid out a bold counter-proposal. Instead of relocating full-time, he'd build a rotating mentorship and security team using talent from underserved communities, including his own. He would consult, travel for deployments, but always return home to teach what he'd learned. Within a week, they agreed. "You don't just think differently," the director replied. "You lead differently." Luis smiled at the screen. The decision had felt impossible, but by reshaping the frame, he'd made it his own. That was the key. Not choosing between worlds but connecting them. The announcement was made at a school assembly that same week. Luis stood on stage, flanked by community leaders, SentinelOne reps, and Halcyon Tech executives. The students sat wide-eyed as he described the new initiative, the Global Guard program, a pipeline for kids like them to train in real-world cyber protection, shadow humanitarian teams, and eventually build solutions for causes they believed in. "This isn't just about me traveling the world," Luis said. "It's about all of us. About taking what we learn here and sending it everywhere. You don't have to be born in the right zip code to defend the world. You just have to care, and learn, and show up." It was almost a year to the day since Halcyon Tech's system had collapsed, triggering the chain of events that changed Luis's life forever. Preston reached out and invited him back, not for a press event but for something more personal. "We're doing something today I think you'll want to see," he said. Luis arrived that afternoon in his usual hoodie and jeans, backpack slung over one shoulder. As he stepped off the elevator, the same one where Maria once stood unsure, he was greeted with warm smiles and waves. He was no longer the anomaly in the room. He was part of it now, woven into the fabric of the company's identity. Preston met him at the entrance to a newly renovated wing on the 23rd floor. Frosted glass doors gleamed beneath sleek signage. The Luis Hernandez Innovation Lab. Luis stopped in his tracks, his throat tightening. You named a lab after me? Preston nodded. It's where we train all incoming junior engineers. We run live crisis simulations based on your original emulator. And your open source module? It's now standard in every system upgrade. Luis stepped inside slowly. Walls were lined with interactive terminals, coding workstations, and real-time defense monitors. In the center was a digital mural, a photo of him at 17, USB in hand, eyes focused. Below it read, "Prepared, curious, unafraid." But the real surprise waited in the next room. Preston opened a side door, and Luis immediately recognized the space. It had once been a utility closet where his mom used to stash her cleaning supplies. Now it had been transformed into a lounge area with photos of staff, quotes about equity and innovation, and a plaque that read, "In honor of Maria Hernandez, whose quiet strength made everything possible." Luis stared at it, tears welling. "You didn't have to do that," he whispered. Preston's voice softened. "We did. Without her there's no you. And without you, there's no us." Luis turned away for a second, overwhelmed. He had never felt so seen. Later that afternoon, Luis found a quiet spot by the window where it all began. The same desk. The same view of the skyline. But the feeling was different now. He wasn't an outsider looking in, he was a builder looking out. Devin stopped by and handed him a small box. "We had this made for you," he said. Inside was a gold-plated USB, engraved with a single phrase, "Access granted." Luis chuckled, shaking his head. "You guys are so corny." Devin smiled. "Yeah, but we're your kind of corny now." They both laughed, the kind of easy laughter that only comes after long battles fought and won together. That night, Luis walked home instead of taking a car. The streets buzzed with life, music from stoops, kids playing basketball under flickering street lamps, corner stores alive with chatter. Every block held a piece of his story. When he reached his apartment, Maria was waiting with dinner on the stove and a tired smile on her face. "They made a plaque for you, you know," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "For me?" Luis nodded, setting the gold USB on the table like a trophy. "Yeah. They finally see what I've always seen." Maria scoffed playfully. "Took them long enough." They laughed, clinked glasses, and sat down to eat, two warriors at peace, surrounded by the warmth they built together. In the quiet hours of the night, Luis sat at his bedroom desk, the room lit only by the glow of his monitor. Outside, the city hummed, but inside, everything felt still. He stared at a new line of code blinking on the screen, unfinished, open-ended, full of potential. Just like him. He thought about everything that had brought him to this point. The flashing red lights, the disbelief in that boardroom, his mom's steady hand, and the decisions that reshaped his life. He hadn't followed a roadmap. He'd drawn his own. And with every keystroke, he'd carved out a space for others to follow. He scrolled through messages from students around the world. A boy in Nairobi who had replicated his firewall for a school network, a girl in Detroit building a cyber defense team at her high school, a teacher in Appalachia using his open source module to train teens who'd never seen a terminal before. Each message was a spark. Each one a reminder that visibility wasn't vanity, it was a torch. He didn't ask for the spotlight, but now that he had it, he would aim it outward. Toward others. Toward the hallway kids. The overlooked. The underestimated. He knew what they needed most. Someone to say, "I see you." Maria peeked in from the hallway. "Still up?" she asked, her voice soft with that familiar mix of concern and affection. Luis turned. "Just thinking." She smiled. "About what?" He paused. "About what comes next." She stepped into the room and kissed the top of his head just like when he was small. "Whatever it is," she said, "you'll handle it. You always do." He smiled, closed his laptop and sat back. The future no longer scared him. Because now he understood, being unplanned didn't mean being unprepared. He had all the tools. He had his name. And most importantly, he had his why. As he climbed into bed, Luis looked at the ceiling and whispered a quiet promise. "I'll keep building. For them. For us. For every kid still waiting in the wings." He felt the weight of his USB chain around his neck, a symbol not of tech but of truth. He wasn't just a success story. He was a blueprint. Proof that brilliance doesn't need permission. That potential doesn't check for pedigree. That sometimes the person who saves the day isn't in the boardroom or behind the badge. Sometimes he's just the cleaning lady's kid who happened to be paying attention, and had the guts to speak up when it mattered most. And so, the story of Luis Hernandez didn't end with applause or plaques or viral headlines. It ended with purpose. Quiet, steady, unshakable purpose. The kind that doesn't fade after the camera lights dim. The kind that grows roots in places long ignored. He had walked into a building unseen and walked out a symbol of possibility. But he didn't do it for glory. He did it because he could. And because someone had to. So when the world asked how a teenager saved the tech empire, the answer was simple. He was ready. And now, thanks to him, so were countless others.